Day 958 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzie here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a look at those Russian losses, as currently Russia sits on more than 662,000 military personnel losses, representing an additional 1,340 in the past day. Then as for hardware losses, 7 tanks, 30 APVs, 47 artillery, and another air defense system. Now let's take a look at that air defense loss, shall we? This one is the 39 N6 Custer 2 radar, primarily associated with an S300 or S400 air defense battery. And in this instance, it wasn't even an anti-radiation missile that took out the radar, but instead a HIMARS rocket that was relayed the coordinates from a Ukrainian recon drone, where it occurred in the Luhansk region. And I was just saying yesterday that these defense systems, these air defense components, sit within about a 40 to 50 kilometer range of the front lines, and this one was clearly no different. And not to poke fun at this latest event, but the radar literally should have seen this one coming. Or one could argue that it did, by intercepting the rocket, but that's an expensive one-time deal, at an estimated cost of $40 to $60 million for this radar component. These are such serious and significant losses that appear to be happening at an accelerated rate now, truly astonishing. Then headed across to the map and starting out in Russian Kursk territory, where Russian forces most recently have been looking to cut into Lyubimovka after more than a week of fighting. It doesn't appear that Russia managed to grab a permanent foothold into the town, as geolocating footage only confirms presence in the western edge as Ukraine holds it to the center and the east. Now, interestingly, as for this region, we saw some captured Russian kit from their first separate rifle Semenovsky regiment, who are typically tasked with guard duty and the defense of Moscow. This means that the Russian regiment was far from home, showing signs that Russia is tapping into every manpower resource they can, all of the time. And I know what you're all wondering, what on earth is that thing on the left? Is it a radio? Well, it's actually a vintage Soviet flashlight, used between 1950 up until the 1980s, used for seeing in the dark and also used as a signaling lamp, meaning that it's incredibly outdated, and yet this is what their forces have been equipped with a slight Z symbol upgrade. Whereas the AFU will often be equipped with compact, durable, LED tactical flashlights, modern communication tech, and not the least of which, helmet-mounted lights with night vision goggles. But at least these Russian soldiers have the Golden Russian Federation double-headed eagle emblem. Well, not anymore. Then headed to the main axis of attack for Russia at Pokrovsk, where temperatures will plummet overnight to 0 degrees Celsius in less than a fortnight, which is 32 degrees Fahrenheit, with minimal precipitation up until this point, although next week is when the debilitating, muddy season of Rasputitsa officially commences, with more than half of next week expected to rain, and that's the earlier part, the first part of the week. Meanwhile, Ukraine is preparing more defenses on this front, as engineering troops began digging new lines around Pokrovsk, but also, and for the first time, on the road to Dnipro. Then we'll head a little bit northeast on the map as Russian forces managed to cross the Donbas Canal again and grab a foothold in Zvyotnevny, the neighborhood to the east of the town. Now, the Russian forces have performed these operations a number of times previously, coming from the north and south, but mostly from the north, beyond the canal, which has become an extremely costly exercise as it usually involves a heavy reliance on infantry assaults, combined with a small faction of mechanized attacks with armored personnel carriers, all of which has been met with fierce Ukrainian opposition, including the use of FPV drone strikes and artillery fire. Despite these challenges, Russian forces have continued their assaults, which is unsurprising, but most challenging would be for the Russian army to continuously resupply their own Russian infantry and mechanized units from beyond the canal. in the event of a Russian breakthrough into downtown Chasiv Yar, so logistically speaking, as there are some narrow pathways or access points across the canal in which to provide support to their ground forces. Interestingly, this is essentially the only location along the entire canal that Russia is pressed up against, perhaps because they otherwise know it to be an uphill attritional battle. So Russia certainly opts to go around it, but to do so, they've got to travel 30 kilometers south of the existing front lines, all the way to Toretsk, where the canal ends, and where the Russian forces, by no coincidence, have been looking to capture for some time now, as they continue with their approach, so through into the main road, across to the town, but are finding themselves up against some heavy opposition by the Ukrainian forces. Then just beyond here, the northern front lines of New York have remained relatively stable, at least in terms of no map changes in the past 2 weeks or so, but it is still very much an active zone. Then headed to the south of the map, because without any changes in Vuhledar, we head almost right next door, well, 18 kilometers or about 12 miles, where there are reports of a Russian presence in or closer to Zolota Niva, officially part of the Velika Novosilka axis, which is a fairly decently sized town, all of which is part of a wider area where the Russian forces hope to reach the main N15 highway as a means of cutting off logistical routes for the AFU that aid in the support of the Kurakova direction. In fact, just next door to this area is the border that leads on to Zaporizhia, where it's traditionally been harder for the Russian forces to support offensive engagements, as the whole region, and beyond, including Kherson, starts to become a bridge too far, and has more often than not been a slightly neglected front for Russia, militarily speaking. Although in the current context of the southern front lines, there is a very recent expectation that Russia's military is looking to facilitate a strong push further into Ukrainian-controlled Zaporizhia. And on that note, a Russian attack across the dam near Kamenska is being widely reported in pro-Russian channels. And if proved to be true, it would be difficult for Russia to hold these positions at this location, as it's a precarious bridgehead and will be difficult to supply, as the Russians will need to cross 800 meters of unstable, open, soggy wetlands, as the muddy terrain is really all that remains after the destruction of the Kakhovka Dam, where if we are to put up the satellite image, we're actually talking about the loss of the once large reservoir. Even still, something key to note is that heavy equipment would be an issue. Then briefly headed back to Feodosia of Crimea, as a new fire at the oil depot continues to burn for a second day after explosions were reported, with another fuel tank catching fire. The oil depot, essential for Crimea's fuel supply, is critical for the region's logistics, and the ongoing fire poses a significant threat to the occupiers' infrastructure. Putin's birthday celebrations clearly continue into a second day. Then next on the map, we'll head all the way to Kaliningrad, which is the Russian exclave, positioned closer to downtown Europe, let's say. And the reason for the red colouring, well, let's see what the map says. East Prussia is temporarily occupied, annexed in 1946 as a result of World War II. Another example of Soviet Russia's love of annexations. So for this location, Ukrainian military intelligence reportedly sabotaged the Russian Baltic Fleet minesweeper, the Alexander Ubikov, in Baltiysk, severely damaging its engine after water entered through a hole in the gas pipe. The repairs are also now said to be quite difficult for Russia, as they lack the access to rare engine components needed for its restoration, as found on the global supply chain that they've lost access to. Another sad day for Russia's naval fleet. Oh, and since we're at this location, I may as well mention Lithuania customs officials intercepted military equipment, including camouflage nets and uniforms, that were on trains traveling from Kaliningrad to Moscow. The military items were hidden among ordinary cargo on passenger trains, And since discovered, the confiscated equipment has been transferred to Ukraine as military aid. I think we all love a happy ending. Then headed across to a little bit of news for the day, so we'll start off with some Russian economy news, or at least Russian economy adjacent news, as the Russian elevator decline continues, where we see here Russian locals will be using this elevator for the last time, as these modernized Western engineering marvels are unable to be maintained or repaired as required anymore, with reports of at least one or more elevators within most business or residential buildings within Russia now no longer operating, with no outlook on the horizon for being able to be repaired. And it's all as part of an almost unexpected outcome of Russia being heavily sanctioned by the West, yet at the same time being heavily dependent on Western products, services, and technology on such a wide and obviously, as we see right here, all-encompassing scale, reaching every nook and cranny of Russian society. The day of the elevator seems to be coming to an end for Russia. And being that Russia has countless 9 to 12 story residential buildings in their country, events like these are going to lead to a massive real estate purchase or rental change in the market that has everybody gunning for the first and second floors. But ultimately, there is going to be a lot of fed up Russians who have to walk up and down 10 flights of stairs every day. Oh, and when they do that, most, if not all, flights of stairs in Russia, residential or business, pretty much always have a portrait of Putin. That means they'll be looking at Putin every day when they perform their daily climb. That's gonna cause some seething. Then headed across to some more news, another economy news segment, possibly a mobilization blunder adjacent segment, as the Khanty-Mansi region and the Belgorod Oblast in Russia have significantly increased signing bonuses to record-breaking new levels for military recruits. Khanty-Mansi is now offering up to 2.75 million rubles, which is roughly 29,000 US dollars, while the Belgorod Oblast sets a nationwide record with a 3 million ruble sign-up bonus, which is roughly 31,200 US dollars. These large incentives reflect the ongoing desperation to fill military ranks amid ongoing losses in Ukraine. Now, the Russian narrative here, of course, is that they have unlimited manpower. But supply and demand basic economics does not lie. And there's not enough African mercenaries to fill the gaps. But just for a little bit of extra context here, given average wages and purchasing power, Belgorod's $3 million sign-up bonus would be equivalent to the Pentagon's offering of $174,000 for a signing bonus for an infantryman. Things are getting desperate up there in the Kremlin. And I really mean that, because I might have to start a regular rapid-fire session of 5 or 10 Russian economy stories, each video the length of one sentence each, as Russia's chickens really appear to be coming home to roost now, and it's frightening. Then headed across to a quick funny to round it all off for today, guys. So, Ukrainian hackers targeted Kremlin-controlled TV channels, including Russia 1 and Russia 24, during Putin's birthday yesterday. The attack wiped out broadcasting servers and backup copies, disrupting services and leaving channels offline in a major cyber operation. But the icing on the cake here would be the broadcast video. A fake of Putin where he states that this is his last birthday, as Ukrainian attacks intensify, and that Ukraine is reclaiming its land. He also requested, the pretend video also requested that the people of the peninsula to aid the Ukrainian army by providing critical intel to help swiftly end combat to have Ukraine liberate the area. That's a real nice touch of that one. Well, it's time to give up the invasion and listen to the boss. So that's it for today, guys. Thanks again for watching. Please continue to like and comment. Thanks once again for all of the support. Really helps keep the channel going. And I do hope to see all of you guys there on the next one. Cheers.